Judita DaSilva. Judita, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. So, what do you make of the news that Spotify have clearly decided that Meghan Markle is not worth the money?
Oh gosh, you love the way you don't mince words. I think it's kind of a question of recalibrating business on both sides, because I think with the Harry and Meghan brand after the exodus from Britain, I would say they spread themselves too thin. But I think they were in a situation where they needed to know what was going to stick. But then you have an Oprah interview, you have the Netflix series, you have the biography Spare, and then you had the podcast they were supposed to do. But what it said is that from insiders on the Spotify side, they're saying that in 3 years, they only generated one series and they expected more for an almost $20 million deal. And Spotify, the business, is also grappling with understanding the podcast space. They've famously had teething problems with big personalities in the podcast space like Joe Budden, Joe Rogan, Jamel Hill, and they ended their deal famously with the Obamas last year because a lot of the content creators want more visibility than an exclusivity to Spotify. And a lot of the Black creators want more financial remuneration when they see people like Joe Rogan get a $200 million deal. But for Meghan and Harry, I think it was a case of entering the podcast space. You have got big contenders and big personalities. If you can't churn out the content, you become a financial liability for the business. And so they amicably severed ties with one another.
It is remarkable. I think a lot of what you said there is absolutely on the money, really, which is that if you are being paid a heck of a lot of money, I mean, the amount of money, I shudder to think what I would do for $20 million, and most of it would be illegal, I think. But the idea that they couldn't churn out enough content for that amount of money, is it lazy?
No, I think it's just they bit off more than they could chew. But then it's also part of you do have to empathize that they were in a situation, like I've said it so many times, they were not cut out for the kind of fame they have. Because for all of his bluster, Harry was protected by the firm, even though he found it problematic. And now he's beginning to understand that people of that stature of fame, they have to contend with really big things in the real world. And he's learning about that. So they kind of must have been in a situation where they said yes to everything, but you cannot generate that much stuff. Even Michelle and Barack Obama, they've been very careful and gradual with what they do because you need to pace themselves. But that's a former American president. They know about pressure. These are relatively young people with an insane amount of fame that just can't handle it.
Could I politely suggest as well, though, that maybe they've turned toxic? I mean, they've had a series of losses recently with the old low-speed car chase through New York. I don't think the reaction to Prince Harry's book was particularly good at all. I know that the sales figures were good. I think that was more out of, like, a morbid curiosity than anything else, than the content of it. And, you know, you look at the way that the public reaction is today, the South Park episode, I mean, good grief, the kind of international fame that they wanted was not that, was it? And so, really, I mean, are brands going to look at them now and think, do I want to be aligned with you? And also, what do I get out of it? What's the point?
On one side, let's be cynical, we're members of the press. And it's almost like when dealing with Donald Trump, it's kind of toxic, but it makes the 24-hour news cycle. When it comes to Harry and Meghan, they're box office gold when it comes to covering press in a 24-hour news cycle. You may not like them, but they do good business for us in the press. But at the same time, I think also they did not understand the space they were trying to get into. And now that they have new management, which is the smartest thing to do, what you do is put all the cards on the table, see what is viable and see what is sustainable. And then, pick your projects carefully. That way you will make good work. And as far as them being a toxic brand, it's in show, but they're in Hollywood. No publicity is bad publicity. Even if you're toxic, you're going to sell tickets. So I don't think that's a problem in America.
Interesting. I might slightly disagree with that, but we'll see how it pans out. And certainly their accountant isn't disagreeing with you, let's be honest. So, I mean, who am I to say anything about it? Was it a mistake to try to do a podcast that was based around some kind of holier-than-thou, higher echelon of intellect? I have got this message to give across, words of wisdom, when, with respect, Meghan Markle maybe did not have the lived experience or, dare I say it, intellectual wisdom and capacity to actually offer something to people in a way that a lot of other people do, like Jordan Peterson, for example?
I think that it's 100% that when you're getting, like I said, the podcast space, it's sensational and terrifying because there are big personalities, intelligent personalities, seasoned personalities. But I do appreciate the good intention behind what she was trying to do as a woman with a very big platform. I think she was ill-equipped to do it on the level she was because you're competing with the likes of Michelle Obama, who's a slam dunk. But I think you learn hard lessons when you're that famous, and they will do better in the future.
Look, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Judita DaSilva, the royal commentator.